Hey there, my name is Sandy Mills, and I work for Exit Realty Southern Select in Trussville, Alabama. And I just wanted to hop on and talk about the National Association of Realtors, just kind of fill in maybe some gaps, answer some questions that some buyers and sellers have asked of me, and maybe help clear some things up. So, the first question I want to go over is really what this lawsuit is about. Where did this come from? So, back in the 1990s, it was deemed to be unfair, and consumers complained about not having their own representation. That back then it was only a listing agent, and everyone had to go through the listing agent. Well, as you can imagine, the listing agent only represents the seller, and so buyers felt like they did not have someone to represent them and defend them. So the practice was started to where we had buyer's agents who would represent the buyer in a purchase, and that allowed for negotiations to be fair. Every party had their own representation. And then the way the commission was structured was that the seller paid the listing agent, and then the listing agent then split that compensation with the buyer's agent. And we've been doing that ever since. So we've been doing that for a while. Well, this lawsuit came about because the sellers who were part of the class action suit decided that that was unfair, or that they did not understand that that was what was happening, that their agent was splitting their compensation with the buyer's agent, and therefore the seller felt like they were paying the buyer's agent to negotiate against them, and also overpaying for those compensations. And so, National Association of Realtors then they settled along with some other companies to and created a settlement that paid back a lump sum to those sellers and their lawyers, and then also changed the rules in the way that we do compensation. So I want to talk through those, and then also how that affects buyers and sellers. So one of the changes is for buyer's agents, and this is going to affect buyers. So the buyer's agent now is required to have a signed document with a buyer before they can take them to tour a property. This is to acknowledge from the buyer that they understand the buyer's agent is being paid compensation for services provided in showing a home, negotiating a contract, and getting to the closing table, and all the other steps that go in between. So that agreement can be for a day, for a month, for a year, for that sole property. That's available too. So it's just dependent on the buyer and the buyer's agent and what they agree to. And so if you're a buyer wanting to look at homes, and you want to have someone open that door for you and explain to you how things work and how to get to the closing table, then you'll want to interview agents and understand what their process is. Take the time, take the week or couple of days to interview a few different agents and understand what their process is, so that when you hire someone, you feel comfortable with them and you can start the process. The other change is the decoupling of compensation. So what that means is that the instead of now the seller paying the listing agent a commission and then the listing agent splitting that with the buyer's agent, now it is under that is not a requirement, and that's not assumed up front that that's how it's going to go. The seller can still pay the listing agent, and the listing agent still split that with the buyer's agent. The seller can still pay the listing agent and pay the buyer's agent, but it's all done through negotiations. What you as a buyer would want to know and want to be prepared for is that it may be that you will be paying your buyer's agent directly for the services they're providing. And it's my recommendation that every buyer be prepared to do that, just in case they're not able to negotiate and get the seller to pay that on the house that they want to purchase. So those are the two biggest changes. There's some other smaller ones too, but those are the two biggest changes that affect buyers, and it's going to affect negotiations and the way that your loan is structured potentially, and how you operate through the transaction. So like I said before, definitely recommend that you interview your buyer's agents, understand what it is that they offer. If you understand how it's going to work. It'll be a much smoother transaction. And also understand who you're hiring, not buying, who you're hiring, because you want to know that when they explain something to you on the negotiations or the condition of the house or the contract, that you feel comfortable with them, that you trust them, and that you know the information you're being provided is making sense. The other piece of it is understanding their history, how long they've been in the business, how many buyers have they represented over the years, what savings have they been able to negotiate for their buyers. So these are all questions that you can ask your buyer's agent in that buyer's agent consultation, and I'd highly recommend that you have one of those. On the sell side, if you're a seller and you're wanting to list a property and hire an agent to list that property for you, now that compensation that sellers can offer to buyer's agents can no longer be advertised in the MLS or the multiple listing service, which it had been before. And so that has been removed. Sellers can still offer compensation to buyer's agents, and they can still offer seller concessions or paying closing costs and things like that for the buyer, but it cannot be advertised in the multiple listing service as a compensation to the buyer's agent. And then the seller concessions is just noted that the seller is or is not offering concessions. So those are things that have changed through this lawsuit. The seller now, depending on how you structure it, can pay their listing agent, and then they can offer to pay a buyer's agent compensation and have a set fee that they're advertising that they are willing to pay to a buyer's agent. Or the seller can also just say, yes, you're willing to negotiate that, and wait to see what is asked of them. And that is how I definitely advise my sellers to structure their listing, so that the seller, whom I would be representing at the time, would keep as much money in their pocket as possible. And just negotiate that. Have those conversations to make sure that those fees are understood and that those are negotiated to the client's best interest. And so that's the biggest change for the seller. Those are areas where things can be negotiated that are changing or have changed for agents, and how the listings are structured. If you're interested in this and have any more questions, feel free to reach out. Happy to talk to agents or buyers and sellers that are looking to make a move this year or whenever. It's complicated, but I think in the long run, once everyone gets used to it, it will be something that is better for our industry and will be a positive in the way that our industry operates. I hope you guys have a great day, and thank you for listening.